Ladies and gentlemen, we will call this meeting to order. Can I get a motion that the agenda for the August 16th, 2022 regular meeting of council be adopted as presented? Moved by Councillor Moore. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion that the minutes of the July 19th, 2022 regular meeting of council be adopted as presented? Moved by Councillor Chenard. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. We have no public hearings, but we do have a couple delegations this evening. Our first is reflections. Ms. Ann Orient, if you want to come forward and with your group and introduce yourselves.
So I'm Ann Orient, and I manage a recycling depot, but I also volunteer for a number of organizations. One of those is Reflections, and I volunteer as the treasurer and a little bit of the director part-time, but mostly just the treasurer. So we have Debbie Bezaire, who is the board chair.
And Taylor O'Brien. I am a social worker at the Primary Care Network, and I've been on the board for Reflections for a couple of years. And prior to that, I was the executive director there as well.
So I'll be just answering a few questions if it comes up about financials and about the operation of the pods, but these two ladies are gonna take over.
I'm just gonna read the basic premise of what Reflections does. We made a little presentation. So Reflections' goal is to assist.
If you'd like, I can get the presentation
Yeah.
up for you. So
Yeah.
you can, have it broadcast on the screen. if you'd like.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's nice.
Sorry.
Sorry.
That way we can blank out the lower side of the council chambers.
It's very short and sweet, and we just wanted to open it for discussion and questions and just say the basics of what we do and our financial needs.
Okay, Reflections' goal is to assist individuals in our community with day-to-day needs. Our nutrition program provides many of our at-risk community members with proper nutrition by providing meals, hygiene products, washroom and shower facilities in a safe, comfortable environment. We hope to assist our clients in achieving a more meaningful life. Reflections can be split into two separate programs: day-to-day drop-in and emergency shelter pod program. Our basic drop-in program, open 7 days a week, 9 to 6 as a drop-in program for individuals who are homeless or have various mental and physical challenges. Provide 2 lunches and 1 evening meal during the week, lunches on Saturday and Sunday. Daily breakfasts are available for our clients to make themselves, along with snacks and beverages on a self-serve basis. Shower facilities and free laundry service. Various hygiene, first aid, and clothing available when Reflections has a supply on hand. Reflections provides a social gathering area with TV, chairs, couches, and an entertainment system. We have 2 computers available for client use. Supplier of the Meals on Wheels program for the community as a whole. Provide resources and give direction to access services locally and regionally. Currently, we have 20 to 50 individuals visiting our program on any given day.
Is there any questions on that, or?
You can continue on. We'll ask our questions at the end.
Okay,
Okay, the basic Reflections program is funded by basic monthly expenses for Reflections currently around $11,000. Base Alberta Health Services quarterly grant, town FCSS grants, monthly Lions Club donation. We get casino funding, provincial government CIP grant funding, donations from numerous service groups, the Rotary, the food bank, corporate and community donations of cash, clothing, and hygiene items, food donations from Walmart, Sobeys, and the food bank, and the Rural Development Network. And now Taylor's going to speak on the shelter pod program?
So the emergency shelter pod program is a new development for Reflections. We took that over from the wayfinding program in December of 2021. So Reflections oversees allotments of the pods at the end of the day to make sure that people are exiting the pods in the morning. We pay all of the bills associated with the maintenance, cleaning, and general operations of the pods. We do provide care packages for people over the evening when Reflections is closed. We problem solve any issues that are coming up, problem solve them fairly quickly. We haven't really had a whole lot of issues that have not been able to be resolved very quickly. We do oversee security monitoring of the pod facility. Program is at near capacity, which is the only minor issues that we've been needing to address. And on average, it's serving 250 individuals every month. So that is funded. We have basic monthly expenses that are around $5,000 a month. And then security costs are anywhere between $5,000 to $10,000 a month. We've gotten lots of donations from numerous service groups, including the Rotary and Food Bank, corporate and community donations of cash, clothing, and hygiene items, food donations from Walmart, Sobeys, and the Food Bank, the Rural Development Network grant, and the Town of Edson grants, and various other grants from Red Cross Civil Liberty Grant as well. So, our current requests from all of you in order to see Reflections carry on is to help with the expenses for providing security at the shelter pods. That has been our biggest issue, is that we're running a deficit every month because security is so expensive, but it is something that we feel is necessary to keep just to keep people comfortable with the idea of having the shelter pods there. So we would like to be considered for the inclusion in the budget for 2023. And also assistance with development of future plans for caring for the homeless and mental health population that reside in our community. More comprehensive yet sustainable strategy to address the needs of the at-risk individuals in our community needs to be developed. The shelter pods are kind of the first step in that direction. But we know that we need some sort of transitional housing to get people away from the shelter pods and back contributing to the community. And if we have any more questions, that's all we have for the presentation. So we're open to any questions you have, and can speak to more of the financial piece. But as far as day-to-day, I can answer some questions as well.
Very well, thank you, Debbie, Taylor, and Ann, for your presentation here this evening, and we will open the floor to questions. Councilor Sharp.
I understand your request, but can you give me more details on what you mean by security? I thought it was cameras, so we have a physical person there?
Yes, there is cameras. There is also the door locks, those issues. But what we found last October, November, when the other group was looking after it, there comes a time, and also complaints a little bit about people using the recycling facility of issues that were happening there. What we found is that security paid for itself tenfold. I think there has been definitely less calls, complaints about individuals at the pods. So the pods are good for a certain spectrum of people that need those services. There is some that can't even handle a pod, that have issues that are going on otherwise. So the security, it is McStrong security. So under the budget that we did for the provincial grant that we did last fall, we included, I think it was 8 hours a night or 7 hours a night, 7 days a week. So she would be there in her vehicle, and we found that as an asset. So if there's an issue that we've got someone banned from there or a trespassing issue, she knows that person, phones the RCMP right away, and it's really addressed. Or if there's other issues going on at that point, she keeps it going very, very smoothly. So the feedback and people having the sense that it's a secure site is really important. Also, some people get locked out, some have other issues. She is a very, an incredible person to be doing that job. So it is very expensive. When we did it for the 8 hours a night or 7 for 7 days a week, it ended up being about $9,000 for the year. And security is not cheap. So what they would do sometimes if they had another job at the hospital, they would tag along with this. We're trying to find other options. Since we had to, the grant was finished in May, we thought it was really important to continue with that, but we cut it down. So it's revolving hours. It's not necessarily every night, but it will be 4 hours at a shot every now and then. And it's enough to discourage issues that happen there. I've also tagged on lately the community garden. So she'll go and do a tour up that way and come back. So it gives us a sense, and then she'll call us sometimes and say, you know, this person is here. I don't think they're supposed to be here, and maybe you have, you know, a trespassing issue with him, and we follow through. So it's a very good, what that group, and I think Constable Delisle mentioned that last year, even that is essential to how that can operate.
Yeah, because just to follow up, what I was questioning, you said 5,000 to 9,000, you did clarify that.
Yes.
If it's a full-time person, the numbers are way out, but they're only part-time, they only
Yes.
come and go.
So the one option, it is $30 an hour or $50 an hour. So if you multiply it out, it's times 30 days is $300 a night, which is, you know, it does add up.
10,000, yeah. That's where I was just clarifying, you said 5,000 to 10,000, I'm thinking, how'd you get someone so cheap
300 a
full-time?
night at $50 makes it 6 hours straight, right? But we would alternate those hours. And so now we could not afford that continuing on. So it is like a hit and miss. So some nights they're there and they'll switch around, and because people are used to patterns too. So we had some people watching, oh, I know she comes on at 9 and she goes at this time, so I'll come after that.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Anybody else? Any other questions? Councillor Taylor and then Councillor Moore.
Thank you, ladies, through the mayor. Thank you for your presentation. And thank you for your work. I know this has been a lot of work setting up the shelter pods, and also the work that you do with reflections every day and helping the vulnerable in our society. So talk a little bit about the shelter pods. And before we talk about the funding, I do want to talk about the pods themselves. And it comes up in your presentation. And I even look back at the original presentation that was made in November of 2020. These are emergency shelter.
Yeah.
Okay. And it was for individuals in our community that had nowhere else to go on an emergency basis, that would go there sort of on a one night sort of stay, right? Looking at it now we've been in operation, and again, for just as a refresher to everybody, this is still in its pilot process, right? It was a 2-year piloting process. That was the original, the presentation. So would you consider that the pods are still like an emergency use, or are we seeing the same individuals use it on a nightly basis? In your presentation, you made it, Taylor, you had mentioned this. How many?
There was a question I was gonna ask, it was about
250 individuals reside in the pods every month. 250 like different individuals?
No, they're not. They're quite often repeaters. There's some that are new that just come in that have been, we work in conjunction too with the mission.
Yeah, so the mission, they oftentimes they'll be just over capacity, and there would be people stacked on top of each other. So they will send people to the pods and vice versa. If the pods are full, then we will send them to the mission if there's no other option. And a lot of transient people are coming through here going from Edmonton to Jasper. So we will also get those for new people, but we do have lots of people that are staying in there repetitively, for sure.
And the big thing with that is there's no place to go from there.
Yeah.
This is the first key, but there is no continual housing or places. There's some that very well could, that I can think of, 2 or 3 couples that could move on to the next step, but there is no next step.
Yeah, and sorry, the
No, go-
issue that we're running into and that I see a lot as a social worker is I get referred people all the time that need low income housing. And we all know the rental prices in Edson are by no means low income. So that is something that we have to work around as much as we can. And a lot of these individuals have kind of burned themselves out of a lot of the rentals here because of their mental health and whatever the case may be, so.
So if an individual wanted to sort of book a spot in the pod, what is the process now? So the original process was someone would show up roughly around 8 o'clock or just before 8 o'clock PM. And it was on a first come, first served basis. And I know we had issues late last year with, a number of people showing up and not enough pods. What is the process now?
So they are usually at Reflections during the day. And so at about 4 o'clock, they all start approaching Michelle saying, my other place fell through, or I need a place for the night. So Reflections keep a month or daily register, and they put 5, and when it's full, that's what it is. And so they'll give them the code at that time on a little sticky note, and then they can go into their pot. But we don't want them to go there until like 6, because then it's less busy at Reflections. So now it's more of a direct. They still do phone every now and then, and someone does have the phone from, I think leaves it open till about 9, but generally it's done at that point. And so you can assess. So Michelle is very good at that. She knows who they've been acting up here. They're just too unruly that, no, you can't have a pot tonight. You need to find another option, because it just, you get a good sense. And she also then is the gatekeeper. So if someone trashed it the night before, sorry, you're out for 2 weeks. So it's a pretty good, I think, reward, or, a system. And then they also give gift cards. If someone's been good for a week and has actually cleaned and raked everything, they get a $10 gift card. So it's part of an encouragement to keep the place clean and follow the rules.
Thank you. We'll get back to you. You have more questions, Councilor Moore?
Through the chair. Whoever can answer this one, it's a pretty simple one, I think. 1 or 2 to a pod, usually.
Well, it starts off as 1, but because it's not regulated, if 2, maybe 3 go in there, that we can't take that responsibility to be there monitoring it. That's part of the issue. So Alberta Health, we've gone through this because as far as COVID rules, etc. So we had to come up with a policy of saying that we tell them directly, only 1 person per pod. If 2 show up in the morning and we find it, then, so be it. They were okay with that. And so we actually had to go 1 or 2 stages up on that public health rules to get that approved. As long as it's monitored, as long as we have the cameras, we have those control mechanisms at least. That was okay. That's why the number is not, if you said 5 for 30 days,
Yeah,
it's
you can see that
150.
it doesn't.
So through the grant last year that we did with, I think Alberta Rural Housing, we had to give day-to-day stats on it.
And there's been a few problems so far.
They're actually, since December, I'll tell, I was on the group before, we had a lot more problems. Since this time with Reflections controlling it and having that control mechanisms and the security, it's been way less. There hasn't been the damage inside the pods. I mean, before they were minor, but it's definitely a lot better, I think.
Haven't had a lot of problems, nothing really to speak of.
And it
few
also
things.
helped that Reflections, we adjusted our hours so that right when Reflections closed, the pods opened up, so we didn't have a bunch of people waiting outside the pods. Because prior to that,
Yeah.
we closed, the pods didn't open up until 8.
and
So
we
there
were
was people
closing at
leaving
5.
Reflections and they would be lined up outside of the pods for 3 hours in the cold. So then we were getting all sorts of calls about that. So I think
Yeah.
that's helped a lot too.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Councilor Taylor, go ahead.
Through the mayor, to add, so going back to my original talk about emergency, so if someone had, it is a 20 after 7 right now, someone in an emergency situation needed the pod right now, would they be able to get the pod, or at this point are all pods taken?
No, there's occasionally there is some that are open, or else we can try and direct them. The mission is changed its way of doing things, right, Taylor? Like they're lowering the number that can go there, but they do take emergencies, so we can direct someone there. Sometimes the RCMP has someone that they need to drop off and they'll buzz us. And so we will try and figure something out. But yeah, 5 pods in reality, probably another, a couple more doubles. So you could, you know, if you had a trailer that you could split for double and double, that would probably solve most of the problems. But until the security issues, I don't see the recycling depot ever allowing another trailer there after the issues we had last fall. So, you know, it's looking at what comes next. And that's what I think the next presentation from RDN is where do we go to from here. We've got some ideas. There's some individuals that can't even handle being in a pod that actually need a MAP program or some other more supervised program.
Thank you, Councilor Sharp, and then Councilor Pacicci.
You kind of answered the question, but I guess right now it's not as important, but when it gets cold out, when the pods are full, what is our next option? So if you have, let's say 20 people, and even like where Councilor Moore said, we're doubling up. So what is the backup plan when it's cold? Is there a plan?
So usually we would try and disperse people between the pods and the mission and just hope that there's enough room between the two of those. And people are pretty resourceful when it's really cold, but usually that's all that we personally can do for that.
They couch surf a lot. They're very resourceful and
Yes.
look after each other within that community.
And it's super resilient. I don't know, I would not be able to last 2 days in the Alberta
And
winter.
they are tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Councilor Pacicci.
Yeah, through the mayor. I did notice, when I went through, did my cycling a while ago, that like it must have been after 6 o'clock, because there was people kind of milling
Yeah.
around outside. But I did notice there was a tent.
Okay, so the tent issues.
Because I get, we follow the local current news. I mean, Vancouver just went through huge issues out on East Hastings with tents, and I don't really want to see that occurring.
So the issue with the tents, because there is lots of tents all over around in the rural or in the treat areas. So those, I believe the one lady that's in there was actually at the mission. So the mission changed their policies and lowered the number of people there. So then she created the tent. So our security person addressed it and said, you just can't be on the recycling depots area. The police, I think, directed her to across the street, which then got directed. So I don't know what to do with the lady in the tent. And then there's another fellow, and he's actually banned from the pods.
Yeah, and it takes a lot for someone to get banned from the pods, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not really a whole lot we can do for that particular individual.
But it's definitely because of other areas being squeezed, and I think we're gonna probably feel the pressure with the pods. Yes, it's not enough. We do need, I'd say, 2 or 3 more doubles. We need some lower use areas and probably some transitional spots for some of those could actually graduate out of there and move to a different kind of less supervised option.
Before we get to Councilor Taylor, I haven't had a chance to ask any questions yet. So this has been in operation for over a year now. I think security has been a real big asset down there for sure. Certainly the calls that I was getting last fall dissipated quite quickly after security was on site, and I think I even feel more comfortable being down there after hours. The question I have for you is, do you think the pods are achieving the goals that were set out about a year and a half ago for providing that emergency shelter basis? And have you seen, through the work with Reflections, more stability within some of the clients, or is it more of the same?
What do you think, Taylor?
I think it is definitely helping. I know the winter prior to the pods opening up, there was 3 individuals that died from hypothermia in the winter. And the whole point of the pods is to essentially just keep people alive, especially over the winter. So we haven't had any deaths since they
No,
opened up.
not the winter before too. We had individuals that froze and lost their toes and fingers and,
Yeah.
that's horrific.
I think that, when you think of that many people, maybe it's only 5 pods, but about 10 are every night.
Yeah.
Not in the bank or in a parking area.
And, like our staff is fair but firm, like they don't just let everybody go willy-nilly do what they want. Aiden and they're really good. They make sure that they're not allowing people that are making trouble and everything to go there. So they're doing a really good job of monitoring and making sure the individuals that are getting the pods are making the best use of them.
And Reflections being open Saturday and Sunday has made a big difference. And whether sometimes they haven't slept too well, so they come in and sleep all day. I mean, we see repeats, and some go off for treatment and some come back, but this is a bigger issue than pods. There has to be a holistic look at how those clients come back in the community and where is the option for them. I mean, mental health is a huge issue, and it leads to, other problems. So we need to look at it from a different lens. And the pods, yes, I think they're doing their job. Is it the whole job? No, there needs to be some other supports around it.
It's kind of a step one.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I know, talking to the hospital, that they've seen a huge decrease last winter of people showing up with frozen toes and hanging around and that sort of thing, which was one of the issues that we were trying to address, which helps us with things such as EMS, which helps us with RCMP and all those other resources that often get tied up when we have vulnerable individuals on the streets. And just to follow up, you mentioned that individuals banned you. How many people have you banned so far since the pods have started up?
I think it is actually 3 or 4 that have trespass issues. And it's not just it's Reflections, the pods, and the recycling depot. And so it doesn't mean someone's permanently on that. If they've gone for treatment, they're actually more stable, they're doing pretty good. We give them a second chance. But sometimes there's others that you can tell are on a downward trend, and there's going to be issues come up.
And we also have to keep in mind that that person is likely a danger to themselves and could be a danger to the other clients that we have using the pods, and we have to keep them safe too. So if we see somebody who we can tell is on a downward spiral, then we kind of gear them in another way.
Councillor Taylor, you have some further questions?
Yeah, through the mayor. So I do want to say I am a believer in the emergency plans. Like I am very supportive of the shelter pods and the Out of the Cold initiative, and the decrease in people going to emergencies, as Mayor Zahara had said, and the adding of security. We saw a tremendous decrease in some of the issues that were happening down at the recycle depot. So, and to your comments, Ms. Wright, about the bigger plan. That bigger plan, it's happening. We have another presentation up next. And we have the homelessness, evictions, mental health task force, which myself, Mayor Zahara, and Councillor Byer sit on, and we are sort of developing a plan that's going to be based off of that report that we can help. That's a bigger picture, right? the pods are a part of that plan. They're not the solution. They're one facet of the solution. So I am a supporter of that. I do want to talk about, I guess, the ask, as it were. The ask
Yeah.
was, you say basic monthly expenses are currently approximately $5,000, plus security costs between $5,000 and $10,000. And sorry, it said around 9,000 is kind of.
Well, it was when we originally did, what we'd like is 9, but we're trying to be,
Fiscally responsible.
well, and what is the point where you get, it's working, but not overdone, but not underdone? And so we're trying to find that happy medium. You know, it would be great if we could have someone there every night.
And I bring this up because it is a significant.
Oh, yeah,
ask.
it's huge.
I mean, I'll put it in perspective. I think for 100,000, we could get a full-time RCMP officer. And Mr. Beck, is that roughly? Is another officer? I don't know.
We can probably get close to hiring a full-time peace officer for 100,000.
See, and that might be an option. Like, I mean, what I'm saying is that rate, the private rate of $50 an hour, because you got to think of their truck and their otherwise. We're looking at perhaps being able to hire someone, not from the company, but maybe using the recycling depot's truck as their truck. And so you're helping it along, trying to lower that in half. But yeah, that's an issue, but we don't have an option or an answer for that yet.
Because I guess the thing is, you know, you're supplying it for 2023. It's not going away, right? And it's a significant ask, right? And an ongoing ask that someone I struggle with, but I also understand that we have security issues. I've heard from residents of safety issues or perceived safety issues they have being down to recycling, right? And so I want to address that too, but at the same time be using the term fiscally responsible on this end as well, right? So and that's where I somewhat struggle with that. So
I know there was so much of that budget retained from last year, correct? Which is there, but the other thing is Reflections. It's really hard as a nonprofit. So Reflections itself, we pretty well got our budget covered from a whole bunch of different sources. The base running of that of the pods, we're looking through the RDN grant, which we're hoping will happen. What it is that security is the big pill to take. But it's security for the people using the depot, but it's also sometimes those users of the pods are being approached by they're soliciting, and it's saying, well, my bike got stolen, so you guys stole it. And it's vigilanteism. There is that fear out there that we have of running the pods. So it's also there, that security person also keeps a lid on everything else going on.
Councillor Short.
Actually, I'm glad Councillor Taylor brought that up because that was my view too, is similar. Right now, we probably have some pretty high-tech cameras. We
do, but it then does after the scene. So we can be looking and saying, oh no, this person just came on the lot. You know, we can't be sitting watching the lot.
No, well, that's what I'm just trying to think. If we had something, because like an example where homes have cameras that come on and it comes to a phone. So I'm appreciating what you're saying is having the individual, but like Councillor Taylor was saying, makes sense if we could have some kind of camera thing, and if need be, because I agree, if you agree 1 year, it's not going away. And I'm all for the program. How soon are you bringing the other presentation to the bigger picture?
That's
right next.
Okay.
Here,
So
that's
I'll
from
hold
RDN. So we've been working, I think we've met about some other options that we haven't seen the complete report of where we go to and what's some other options. And there's a couple neat ones, I think.
Okay,
that
then I'll
we've been
hold
thinking
my
of.
thought till the next presentation.
Yeah.
Perfect. No other questions. We do have, as you know, the other presentation, which I'm sure there'll be lots of questions about as well. I do want to thank Reflections for the work on this. This is not an easy issue to deal with for any organization, including the municipality. We do have the Alberta Municipalities Conference coming up in September, and we are trying to get another meeting with Minister Luan to talk about supports again, because I think that was huge to help us last year. Unfortunately, that grant's not going to be available. So hopefully we can encourage them to find another grant stream for us to access some of that. And we'll take your budget request into consideration. As you know, it is a big ask, and there might be some other solutions, such as looking at a peace officer, which I'll be quite frank with you, I would be a little bit more supportive of. That way it would give us some additional tools to deal with some of those situations where they wouldn't have to call the RCMP because they would have the ability to issue tickets or deal with those situations directly. So with that.
I have one more, sorry. I wanted to say that Edson, by doing this, has been a trendsetter. You would not believe how many phone calls we've had from other communities. Drayton Valley modeled their program on us and said what things should we do or not do, or how to make things better. Slave Lake, I think Rocky Mountain House, Leduc. There is numerous communities across Alberta and Canada that have looked to us as to how we've done it, how we've done some of these problem solvers. So, I mean, I think everyone needs a little pat on the back, because this has been, at least something is being done and it's proactive. And I think it's becoming a role model or for a lot of other communities.
Just one comment, 3 of us were at FCM and we're all like, Edson was mentioned.
Oh,
And at
really?
FCM, there was shout out to the pods. We're all
nice.
sitting there, hey,
Yeah.
what was Edson about? So congratulations on your group, because we all sat there going, oh, you know, and it was a positive.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, through the mayor, the CAO of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities actually mentioned Edson and the shelter pod program in their address to
really?
the association. So
That was the words I was looking for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you
Thank
know,
you.
it's not a set place and time, that things evolve, things change. You learn from those mistakes and you develop from it. And that's the key, is how do we move forward, and what we might see in 2 or 3 years might be quite a bit different from what we are. But as long as we're open to that.
All right, thank you very much for your presentation. And now we get our next one.
Okay, sounds good. Am I able to stay in?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we have Emma Wallace, who is joining us virtually with the Rural Development Network, organization that we've been working very closely with. Welcome, Emma. How are you this evening?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. How are all of you?
Excellent.
Alrighty, so I'm just going to share my screen here. I'll ask for a verbal okay that you can see the screen.
Yeah, we're good here.
Awesome. Okay. So, hi everyone. Mayor and Council, thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Emma Wallace, and as I said, I'm with the Rural Development Network. And so I think this is a really great segue from the last delegation, the last presentation from Reflections, as we are here today to present the findings of the 2022 Edson Housing and Service Needs Estimation Project. And this is a project that was commissioned by the Edson Homelessness and Housing Task Force. I will preface the presentation by saying that this is a very brief snippet of the entirety of the project and all of the results. It's quite high level, as we don't have a ton of time. So I will encourage all of you to follow along with the report and the infographic that were attached in the agenda packet, and or just check them out later. So let's see. Oh, and I'll also just say I'm working off 2 screens here, so my apologies if I'm not staring at the camera. But before I get any further, I'd love to do an land acknowledgement. So I'd like to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of all the lands. RDN's physical office is on Treaty 6 lands and home to Métis Nation Region 4. The town of Edson is also located on Treaty 6 and home to Métis Nation Region 4. I personally am in Ottawa right now, and so I'm on the unceded Anishinaabe Algonquin territory. And we just like to acknowledge all of the treaty people here today, and we do this to affirm or reaffirm our commitment and responsibility to improving relationships and better understanding the culture of local Indigenous folks across Alberta and across the country. So one more thing, I guess, before I dive in, just to make sure we're all on the same page, I want to do a little bit of common definitions. So we use a lot of terms around the idea of homelessness. And so I'm going to talk about a lot of different terms throughout the presentation. So I figured let's just go through them quickly. So someone who is experiencing homelessness can go through a multitude of experiences. There's a lot of different stops along the spectrum of homelessness. So someone might be unsheltered if they're sleeping in their car, if they're in a tent, in a park. Folks who are emergency sheltered might be those folks who are staying in the shelter pods. They might be at a women's or domestic violence shelter. Someone who is provisionally accommodated is usually someone who is couch surfing, sleeping in an abandoned building. They might live in an overcrowded house, so 5 or 6 people in a 1 or 2 bedroom, or they might have a lot of repairs needed on their house, so a leaking roof, no windows, missing electricity, stuff like that. And then lastly, we have what we call our at risk of homelessness. And these are people who are not yet without a livable home, but their situation is precarious. And that might be because they lack the financial means to stay housed. It might also mean that you know, they're getting close to eviction or something like that. And then throughout the presentation, I'm going to use the term housing unstable, and that encompasses all of the definitions here. So anyone who is unsheltered, emergency sheltered, at risk, etc., is housing unstable. So a bit of context, in the spring of 2022, so only a few months ago, Edson participated in a large-scale housing and service needs estimation to better understand what homelessness looks like in the community. And so to do this, we followed the model that was proposed in the step-by-step guide to estimating rural homelessness that we at RDN developed 5 years ago now. And we worked with the Edson Housing and Homelessness Task Force to develop a customized survey that reflected the community context. And so these surveys were administered to community members at 6 service provider locations, 2 municipal buildings, 1 school, and online as like a Survey Monkey link. And surveys were available for a 5-week period between March 28th and May 3rd. So we received 520 survey responses during the 5 weeks, which is the most any community has ever received in this type of project. And that is 100% due to the efforts of Marcia Jensen, who coordinated this project, and the task force. And so of those 520 surveys, we excluded 85 because the respondents didn't provide consent, they didn't provide their unique identifier, or they submitted multiple surveys, in which case we would have counted 1 of their responses. And so based on this, we were able to use 435 surveys for the analysis. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the results. All of these results, unless I say otherwise, are completely based on the housing unstable population. So throughout our analysis, we were able to determine where people fit. Oh, I guess I should start with this, sorry. So 163 of the 435 survey respondents are considered housing unstable. So further, we were able to calculate that 53 dependents under the age of 18 and 92 adults share the conditions with our survey respondents, which means that 308 people in Edson live in unstable housing situations. Throughout our analysis, we were able to determine where respondents fit along the housing spectrum. So we were able to identify 31 people who are unsheltered, 3 people emergency sheltered, 28 provisionally accommodated, 101 at risk, and then 45 people we weren't able to determine their status, and that's because they didn't answer the questions that would allow us to determine their status. One thing that's really important to note here is that people cycle through the spectrum of homelessness very regularly. As the folks said in the last presentation, people are unsheltered one night and have somewhere to stay the next. And so while this presents us kind of a great view of what homelessness might look like in Edson, someone who said they were unsheltered one night might now be provisionally accommodated. So we have to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. We have a slide here that goes through all of the survey demographics. I've included it in case anyone's interested in going back to it later, but I'm not going to speak to it because we don't have a ton of time. What I would love to highlight here is some pretty interesting and shocking statistics. And so we were able to determine that 16% of respondents do not have sufficient heating in their homes, and 7% of respondents don't have access to safe drinking water. These are obviously quite large numbers. I will say that this is not, unfortunately, this is not uncommon among rural communities, but something I think is really important to share. And then interestingly, respondents who own their home are 8.5 times more likely to be stable than respondents who rent. Excuse me. Another thing we did throughout this survey is we're trying to understand what homelessness looks like, but we're also trying to understand the service gaps and see what services people want to access, are able to access, and what's missing. And so one thing I wanted to note here is that 35 respondents were unable to access the shelter pods this winter because they were full. Excuse me. And so I think that speaks a little bit to our conversation earlier this evening. And I'll kind of touch on it again in our recommendations moving forward. A question that the task force asked us to include was, we asked survey respondents to list 3 places where they feel safe and 3 places where they feel unsafe in Edson. And so we put together a bit of a Venn diagram here. And on the left, well, on my left side, I'm assuming it's everyone's left side, are locations where people said that they feel safe. On the right side are locations where people felt unsafe. And then in the middle is places where some people feel safe and others feel unsafe. And I think this is just a really interesting example of people's perceptions and also how your experience highlights your housing stability. And so in the middle, unstable respondents consider the police station, for example, to be an unsafe place, whereas stable respondents feel that that's a very safe place to be. Similarly, unstable respondents consider both the shelter pods and reflections to be a safe place, whereas stable respondents feel a little bit less safe in that area. We also ask respondents to tell us a little bit more about what they would like to see in the community. So maybe what's missing that they want to see more of. And the top 5 respondents across the board were recreation and social opportunities, more housing options, increased support services, improved safety, and then more support with basic needs. And the majority of folks feel like Edson does provide enough employment opportunities. Most folks don't think Edson provides enough free accessible recreation and social opportunities. People are mostly split in terms of what social services are needed and or if they are needed at all. And then almost everyone thinks that more accessible and affordable housing is required in the community. So based on all of this, we're able to create a picture of the typical person who is housing unstable in Edson. And we do this by gathering the average responses and creating or building that typical profile. And so in the case of Edson, that is a woman between the ages of 26 and 45 with no dependents, who has lived in Edson for less than 1 year. She is currently unemployed, relying on informal income, and finds it difficult to pay rent. She notes that she has needed to stay in an emergency shelter over the past year, but was unable to because there was no space. And because she fluctuates between renting and accessing shelter services, she's only lived in her current home for less than a month. So this provides a typical picture of who survey respondents are. So this is the average survey respondent who is housing unstable. This doesn't necessarily reflect the people that you might see in your community who are housing unstable. But again, reminding that this is based on the survey results. So I just did a very, very quick overview of what we found, kind of highlighting some of the more interesting or key points. And so based on all of these results, we were able to identify 6 opportunities for Edson moving forward. And so to address the issue of housing and homelessness in Edson, we would encourage you to consider increasing community awareness and understanding of homelessness, conducting a safety audit of community spaces, expanding the number of available shelter pods from 5 to 7, expanding low income and or below market rate rental and purchasing options, developing a transitional housing unit, and improving access to support services. So this is obviously, these are wonderful opportunities that can be undertaken to support housing and homelessness in the community. They are by no means an easy endeavor, but kind of 6 opportunities we would encourage you to consider, talk about, and maybe start thinking about as you move forward, as you look into that operational planning or into that housing and strategic planning that were kind of mentioned earlier. Consider some of these activities as helping you reach your goal of addressing housing and homelessness in Edson. So that, as I said, was a very quick and high-level overview of the 2022 Edson Housing and Service Needs Estimation Project. Because it was so quick, I again would encourage all of you to kind of take a look at the report and the infographic for more details. But with that said, I will say thank you for having me. Thank you for your time and your interest in the report and the project. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, well, thank you very much, Emma, for your presentation and your work on this, as well as all of our community partners. I know it was a big undertaking, and if you read the report, there's lots of information in there that I think will help us get a better understanding of this issue in our community. That is something that we're struggling with, and various communities across our province are struggling with right now. Having just visited with Tasman, I was shocked to see the amount of homelessness on the streets in that community. So I'll open the floor to questions. Council, Councilor Persichny, go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair to Ms. Wallace. The one thing that stood out to me in here, maybe it was a statement, maybe you can identify it for me, is what does homelessness look like in Edson? And you start off with a woman between the age of 26 and 45. What I highlighted here is who has lived in Edson for less than 1 year. What are the indicators that says that they've lived in Edson for less than 1 year? And if they have lived in Edson for less than 1 year, where did they come from? Is there any indications to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we do through this survey is we track migration patterns, and we don't track it through their entire life. We track migration patterns back one community. And so we ask folks how long they've lived in Edson. If they weren't born in Edson, where are they coming from? And the majority of folks who are part of this survey have lived in Edson less than a year, and they're coming from another community in Alberta. And so what we often see among the housing unstable population is that they migrate between rural communities quite frequently. And this can be because they're looking to access services that aren't available in their current community. This could be because they're fleeing a violent situation. This could be because there is no family ties in their current community. And then yeah, so I guess that's kind of where I'll leave it. The most folks who are housing unstable are currently fairly new to the community.
Go ahead, Councilor Pastuchek.
I think she answered my second part of the question in that last.
Okay, Councilor Sharp.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I guess my question is, do you have any kind of presentation on a solution and costs? Because I see all the stats, it's no shock we have homeless, but are we doing anything, a solution of what it would cost us? And is the province like every other community in Alberta, we all have the same problem, but we're looking for solutions and cost.
Yeah, absolutely. So the estimation is kind of a first step. It's very difficult to get any funding or any headway in terms of solutions without this kind of base data and this base information. The 6 opportunities we've identified in moving forward, I think are a really great start, specifically looking into developing a transitional housing unit. I think in terms of immediate impact, that development is likely to have the biggest impact in a community in terms of addressing issues of homelessness. That can cost anywhere from $20,000 to $200,000, depending on what kind of transitional housing you're looking for, how big you're looking, and kind of what endeavor you're looking in. So this is the first step, is identifying all these opportunities, getting that base data. From now, the housing task force and RDN will be working to create a bit of a housing work plan or strategic plan in terms of what those next steps would be. And they'll be able to bring that to you with a more fleshed out kind of budget attached.
All right, thank you, Councilor Taylor.
Through the mayor to Ms. Wallace, thank you for this report. I said earlier that along with Mayor Zahara and Councilor Byer, we sit on the Homelessness Mental Health Task Force. We've been wanting to do this for 2 or 3 years, I believe. And due to COVID, we weren't able to get it done. So this is extremely well done, extremely comprehensive. And I'll be honest, a little frightening as well, because we have all this information now, and we don't want it to turn into a report we just sits there and we do nothing with it. We want to do something. So looking at your opportunities for moving forward, I look at the first one where it says increase community awareness and understanding of homelessness. What are your recommendations? How about it best sort of achieve this goal, at least to start?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I would say that's a huge first step in this entire process. As a community, we all have to have the same understanding and the same willingness to move forward in addressing issues of homelessness. So, I think there's lots of opportunities to do some of this. There's kind of the standard hosting community engagement sessions or kind of info sessions around what does homelessness look like in your community, sharing some of these statistics, sharing the profile of who is homeless in the community, answering any questions about about the Shelter Pods project or what a transitional housing project looks like, what these things mean and what the impact would be. But more than that, it's getting together as a community. It's allowing folks to interact together. A big piece, I think that I'm guilty of it too, we kind of disassociate from folks who are experiencing homelessness. We don't often interact in our daily lives, I think, obviously. And so it's very easy to be fearful of the places that folks who are homeless live, stay at, hang out at. It can be easy to be fearful of folks who are experiencing homelessness. And that kind of thing breeds discomfort, less willingness to address the issue or to interact with folks and moving forward. And so I would really recommend, folks both stable and unstable asked for more social opportunities in the community. And if we can come up with some great social opportunities that encourage folks who are experiencing homelessness or who are housing unstable to attend along with folks who are housing stable and get folks interacting, getting to know each other, that's a massive step. That breeds empathy, that breeds willingness to engage. It kind of, again, reminds folks that, I think COVID has been a huge highlight of this. Anyone can experience homelessness. We're one decision away or one event away from being unstable. And so I think those would be my two first things. I think info sessions are a really great start. And then I would really encourage hosting some social events or gatherings. It could be a community meal, that type of thing that allows folks to gather together.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any other questions?
Unless you want to.
So in your report, so thank you for that. And to your point on social events, I think we do a lot of that in our community. So that's a little surprising to me. We have, I would argue, some of the most accessible free events. We just had one last weekend where unfortunately the attendance wasn't that great. So I think that's something that we just need to think about and try to understand a little bit better. But in your report, you said that 105 respondents, 51 of whom are housing unstable, have always lived in Edson. Of those housing unstable respondents who were not born in Edson, 58 came to Edson to look for work or because they accepted a job offer. 33 followed their family to Edson, and 14 came looking for housing. I don't know if you have any insight as to why, if they came here for work, that didn't pan out, or is it they came here because they thought there'd be more opportunity here to find a job, or did they already have a job kind of lined up?
Yeah, so the majority of those folks came hoping to get work. So assuming that there'd be more job opportunities, whether that be because you're closer to kind of, the mountains and the tourism industry, whether it be oil and industry related. But most folks came hoping that the job market would be better than their current location or their current community. A few of those, I can't tell you off the top of my head. I want to say about 8 or 9 had job offers when they moved to the community. But I think the impression of most folks is there are job opportunities here to apply for. And so let's move here and let's try.
And just to follow up to that, do you have any indication, and maybe it's already in here in this report, are any of these folks already have jobs and they just cannot afford housing, or are they unemployed? Because I think there is lots of job opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. So 31% of respondents, so just like I think one page up from where you were looking, 31% of respondents are full-time employed, 10% are employed part-time, and then 2% are employed casually. So that's like, I'm just throwing a lot of statistics at you, so I apologize. I recognize this is can be overwhelming to hear. But 42% of folks are unemployed, and a large majority of those folks are unemployed because they are either retired, they have a illness or physical condition that does not allow them to work, or because of concerns of COVID. So whether that be safety concerns, whether that be because they were laid off due to COVID, that part is a little bit less clear. But yeah, so I guess to answer your question, a good portion of folks are employed, at least casually, though most of them full-time, in which case the reason that folks are struggling with housing stability is because of low wages. So unfortunately, not all of the jobs that these people hold pay a livable income that would allow them to keep up with their rent or their mortgage payments.
All right, thank you, Emma. Councillor Schnurr.
This may follow up to my original question. You've done a study for our town, which is a great job. Is there a study for the province? So what I'm getting at is a lot of times, like where we have our pods into place. So, you know, word gets around, hey, Edson's looking after them. So I'm not against what we've done, but is there a provincial study that we can say Alberta as a whole, and it's not, you know, it's everyone's problem, that if we can bring studies and then bring it forward to both levels of government, because if Edson does nothing, you know, Drake Valley, et cetera, around us, it's everyone's problem, but that would be the better solution, that we can solve it that way. Is there a study like that done for the province?
Yeah, so sort of is the answer. So in 2020, we hosted what's called a Provincial Estimate. And so we worked with 26 communities, rural, remote, and Indigenous communities across the province to do this same estimation. And so we have data from 26 communities across the province that give us a fairly accurate representation of what's happening in the province of Alberta. And so each community has their own individual report, similar to this, though obviously it articulates their results in their community context. And then there's an overarching report that kind of provides the provincial picture. So yes, it obviously doesn't include every community, but 26 communities is a fairly good representation for rural Alberta, though it is 2 years old. So the hope is that we will be able to conduct another provincial study in the future. We're kind of waiting out COVID and looking for funding to do that report. And so I'm happy to share that with all of you afterwards to see the 2020 picture, which can help you build that case to other levels of government. This is our context. This is what it looks provincially. And I'll say right up front, the information that I'm sharing with you, as you kind of alluded to, is not new across Alberta. You're not by any means the only community that's struggling with housing and homelessness. Though Edson is one of the only communities who has, as the folks mentioned in the last delegation, Edson is one of the leading communities in terms of addressing issues of housing and homelessness. The Shelter Pods program is well known across the province and across the country. And the fact that you've all undertaken this estimation as a first step is kind of, you are very much a leader in the province.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Through the mayor, talking about another opportunity, and that's develop transitional housing. This is something that has been coming up continuously over the last little while, certainly on the homelessness task force. This transitional housing has been mentioned a lot, but it seems easier said than done. So I ask similar question to what I asked before. What is the first step in your mind within this step of transitional housing? What first step could we take to approach transitional housing and to accomplish that goal?
Absolutely. It is, I will be completely upfront, a very major undertaking. It is almost a building project in sense, right? And so it can be quite a large project. A few steps that I would say you should kind of start thinking about right away so I guess there's kind of a few pieces to this. One of those steps is, where will this sit? So it does require space, it does require land. And And so that can often be a little bit of a difficulty or a struggle for communities or municipalities to find space for a transitional housing unit, and not just space, but space where everyone is comfortable. This goes back in place with the community needing to be on board, right? So if community is not on board, then they're not going to be willing for a space to be located near them. And so having that conversation and doing all of that will be incredibly important. So as I mentioned before, that community engagement, those community conversations are going to be critical in this as well. Get that conversation going, get people on board and understanding what homelessness looks like in the community and what we're going to be doing to address it. And then I would say the third piece of this is to start considering what you want this transitional housing unit to look like. So there's lots of different ways that a transitional housing unit might roll out. In some cases, it's a physical building. In others, it is like drill trailers that have been purchased and put on a piece of land. But they also look different. Some of them are sober living facilities. Others don't have the same requirements. Some are full-time housed or staffed by wraparound services. Others have, part-time staff. And so it's really kind of sitting down with the data that we have, who in our community is experiencing homelessness, what are their circumstances, and what would best suit them in terms of a unit. And so two of the questions that were kind of like additional questions or not required questions in the survey, I'm just, as I'm talking to you, scrolling to that section, we asked people about future affordable housing. So if affordable housing were available in Edson, would you be willing to, for example, share a building, share a common room, share a kitchen, a washroom? And respondents kind of answered that in terms of their willingness. We also asked folks, if a sober living facility were available, would that best suit your needs, or would you rather a facility without sobriety requirements? And so those kind of nitty-gritty questions are quite important to identify right at the front. So again, I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but those three pieces, a site, the requirements of the building, and then the community engagement are huge first steps.
Thank you.
All right, any other further questions? Councilor Schnarr, you have something new?
Yes, I do. Okay, so with your study and stuff, would you have, because the presentation before us had an ask. So what we're looking at that, so you're just giving us a study, do you have directions for solutions? Or
Yes, Councilor Schnarr, there's 6 recommendations of these.
No, but it's a recommendation. I want to know if she has access to the funding. So if you're doing the study where I said earlier, so if we can point to whichever department that can help us, because I'm looking at Edson's a trendsetter. So if we can make it happen, then we will let whatever department do the funding to make it happen in Edson. So can you point us in the right direction where we can get funding? And we'd be more than happy to be an example if the province wants to step up and cost share with us.
Yeah, so some of these recommendations would likely be undertaken at lower costs and just be kind of taken on in-house. So for example, the community engagement, building awareness of homelessness and issues of housing in the community, your community development department, the housing task force, reflections. I don't casually volunteering people, but but that's something that can be undertaken at a very low cost and can be done in-house. Similarly, the safety audit is something that might be a partnership between RCMP and the task force or other community organizations like that. Again, very low cost, can be undertaken in-house. The transitional housing unit, increasing the shelter pods from 5 to 7. Some of those larger tasks, I can't say off the bat, we don't necessarily have the funding to support that immediately, but there are large grants across provincially and federally. Reaching Home is one that comes to mind that are looking for projects like this. A lot of corporate organizations are also looking to fund projects like this in the area. And so our next step now is to work with the task force to identify those funding opportunities for the implementation of next steps.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. There's nothing further. I will thank you, Ms. Wallace, for your work on this, as well as I mentioned before, our community partners. This will be helpful as we move forward. We try to address this issue. So thank you and enjoy your evening in Ottawa.
Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you. All right, moving on to reading of bylaws. We have none. Reports from administration. Can I get a motion that council accept the Parks Winter Operations Report for information? Councilor Taylor will make that motion, and we have Mr. Guy Latour, Parks and Facilities Maintenance Manager, with us to give us an overview.
Through the chair to council, thank you very much for your time. I have, as you indicated, a report and presentation on our Parks Winter Operations. So please, during the presentation, if you're encouraged to ask questions as we go through, it shouldn't take too long, but I don't want to wait to the end for any questions. So I'm going to talk about the purpose. We'll do an overview of operations. We'll talk about the resources we have. We'll do a really quick overview of intermunicipal comparisons of different communities. We consulted with our staff. We'll review what they had and what the administration feels. And then we'll have some time for discussion, summary, and then next steps. So what we want to do is with this is come up with a parks winter operations policy. So be most efficient and effective with our resources across the departments. So we want to align with what other departments are doing with their winter operations also. So what do we do in parks for winter operations? Well, we have cemetery duties that we have to perform. Snow removal on facilities, sidewalks, and trails. Our parks checks, garbage removals, outdoor ice rinks, and some program support. So I'm going to review a little bit of each of those. So currently, our number one highest priority for us is anything to do with cemetery duties. And it's a little challenging in the winter to do cemetery duties, especially graves. So we have to defrost the graves, and then we have to excavate the grave. And we all have to do this multiple days in advance of the burial. And then depending on how busy roads are, sometimes we have to do a bit of work clearing the snow in the cemetery to remove some of the snow. So always our number one top priority. We drop everything else to take care of whatever we need to do in the cemetery. So it's always our highest priority. And then our second priority after cemeteries is for us always snow removal on our sidewalks, trails, and facilities and pathways. So we have 4 staff and we have several pieces of equipment. We have two John Deeres, a Ventrek, a Skidster, a Toolcat, and what's called an MT trackless. And we have multiple attachments for each one of those pieces of equipment. We have sweepers. We use the sweepers for the majority of the work. And then we have blowers for heavier snow that we remove things when it gets much heavier. Roughly 49 locations within town that we remove the snow in. So we focus on the pedestrian routes, removing the snow in all those different locations. So our priority one that we set up these priorities initially on our own. And that's why we're sharing it with you to get your feedback. So our priority one routes are our facilities, the buildings, the town office, the medical center, Centennial, Fire Hall, Red Brick. So we have 10 locations. And as soon as there's snow, we go out to those facilities, we remove all the snow from those facilities, and we will maintain those facilities snow clear throughout the day. We do not do them on weekends. We currently only do them on weekdays. Then our second priority during snow, when it's, oh, sorry, here's a map of those locations, except for the town shop that's not on there over in the corner. So, but you guys are all aware of those locations. So, and then priority two for us is we move on to the sidewalks throughout town. Roughly 27 locations throughout town that we remove snow. Now, 24 to 48 hours is our self-imposed minimum goal that we've set for ourselves to try to remove the snow. And that's for a normal snowfall. And we try to get them all done within that period of time. We often exceed that and get it done quicker than that. But with all our other duties, that's kind of our self-imposed window that we've set right now for those priority two routes. So, so here's the map. So everything in red is our priority two routes that we go out and clear all the snow. And there's a couple pink routes way over in, what's that community?
West Grove.
West Grove, yes. The West Grove dead ends, which will come up later again. We talk about, so there's 3 little routes over there. So we go out and those are our priority two routes that we go. And how do I go back a slide? There we go. And again, we try to do those, our very best to do those within 24 to 48 hours. And we typically get them done a little quicker than that, normal snowfall. Our priority 3 routes are the highways, 4th and 2nd Avenue locations. These include town properties and multiple sidewalks adjacent to private properties on 2nd and 4th Avenue. So the background here is the rationale, the history that I've inherited, that I understand why we've been doing these, is to increase pedestrian traffic and the ability for pedestrians to move up and down those routes, and to help businesses that snow was pushed back up from highway snow removal. But the question is, should the town be removing snow from the sidewalks adjacent to these private properties? Is it our responsibility to do that? Because we do have a community standards bylaw that requires property owners to keep any adjacent property of theirs snow or ice free, which it lists there, and the community standard bylaw requires 48 hours. So if you look at the map here, all the yellow routes are locations on 4th Ave where we're removing snow adjacent to a private property. The blue ones are where we're not removing snow adjacent to a private property. The red is Centennial, is basically the main location where it's our property. There's a little section down by the airport on 4th, which is our property. And then there's more yellow and then a bunch of blues on 2nd. So there's a huge discrepancy on 4th and 2nd Ave of where we're removing snow, who we're removing it for. some private, adjacent to private properties, and a bunch where we're not removing it adjacent to private properties. That's a big question that's out there that we're going to come back to. I'm going to ask you what your thoughts are on that. So that, and right now that's our third priority. And again, we usually get to that in that window of 24 to 48 hours also. And then our very last priority, priority 4, is the trails. And the window, self-imposed again, that we do our very best is 48 to 72 hours that we've set for ourselves. And so the trails are all the purple routes. It's showing up. Yeah, it's purple on yours. It looks blue on mine for some reason. So all the routes from Hillendale all the way across through the top of Tiffin. And we technically, this section across here, we classify as a trail all along 64th and across the, in front of the airport there, we all classify that all as trail. And we leave, and that's the last section we do as our snow removal routes. So, and that usually, and again, we've self-imposed our own window there at max 72 hours. Normal snow, normal snowfall, we get this all done 48 hours, all of them, just normal snowfall, no additional snowfall, not having to go back and clear mains again. But like last year, as you guys know, when it kept snowing and snowing and snowing and snowing, as transportation had to deal with, we kept going back and having to go back, and same problems. We go back to the mains, clear all the buildings, and then go back to the priority ones and priority 2. So same challenges. So then once we get the snows cleared, our next priority is our parks checks. We try to get to the parks if we can every day or two to clear out the garbages, to pick any garbage, to check how, make sure they're all not, in good shape, and, just give them a good check, right? And check the dog park, and check the garbage or the poop bags and all that stuff. And then sometimes people don't understand that the parks checks and the garbage checks for us are 2 different things. The parks checks, we go and check the garbages every second day, but we also have to do garbage checks for the whole town. So the downtown garbages, all the trails, like it takes a whole day for just one crew to do all the garbages in town, empty them, take them to the dump and everything. And ideally, we got to do that once a week, especially during the summer and stuff. And even in the winter, downtown garbages can overflow and stuff. So we try to get to that at least once a week. And then outdoor rinks on top of it. So the outdoor rinks are a lot of work and can be quite challenging. We struggled, we'll be very honest, last year it was a challenge. So there's a lot of preparation in getting the rinks ready. The base flooding, we have liners for both of our rinks currently. But as you know, we have the Glenwood project moving forward. So we're going to have a nice concrete base for the new Glenwood rink, which is going to be really helpful in preparing the Glenwood, and it'll have new boards that won't leak out, and it'll be very, very helpful. But with the old ones, we have to put the liners in, and then we have to build up the base, snow base, and then you have to have the right temperature, right? So the ideal temperature for flooding outdoors is about -7. And last year, we had a really warm November, and we got a little behind, and then it started snowing bad. And then you got to remove all the snow to do the floods, and you can't flood while it's snowing. So it's a challenge. It's a lot of work, and it takes two guys to do it. So and right now they're rated as a moderate, and we were doing those after the snow. So that's where they fell in the priorities. Once we get them built up, then we typically give them as many floods as we can during the week. And we do actually come in and remove the snow once they're built up on a weekend. Our on-call guy, if it snows on the weekend, will come in on a weekend and remove snow for people can use them on the weekend, and they're not just covered on the weekend and not usable. And then our lowest priority during the winter is program support. And we don't do a lot of it during the winter. We do a lot of program support during the summer, but we do a little bit in the winter, but not a ton. But it tends to fall on our lower end. And if we don't have the staff, we don't support the program. We sometimes say no at that time, because it is our lowest priority. So how do we do all that? Well, we have 4 operators who do that during the winter. We have one supervisor who oversees the operational and the safety aspect of the parks. And as I indicated before, we have a good set of equipment. We do. We have 2 John Deeres. They both have blower and broom attachments. We have a vent track. We have a skidster, a tool cat, trackless, and they all have multiple attachments to do the different levels of snow removal that we need. So we have a fairly decent set of equipment for doing the snow removal that we need to. So what do other communities do? I did my very best to collect as much information and as detailed information as I could from different communities. Hinton didn't have timelines per se, but they had a very detailed priority list of what gets done in what order of priority for their snow removal. Jasper, they clear snow every day, all the time, 7 days a week, and it gets removed instantly. They have an extremely high standard because it's a tourist community. So they have a very high standard. Everything gets cleared instantly within 24 hours, everything. On all their sidewalks and paved trails and everything, and 7 days a week, doesn't matter. They have crews in all the time. Strathcona County, so theirs is a little more extended. It can take up to 8 days for them to clear the snow from all their routes. St. Albert is very much like our standard that we've set up. All their routes would be cleared within 72 hours. Cold Lake, again, very much like ours. They have 3 priorities, and their routes would be cleared within about 72 hours. Okotoks, primary routes, 48 hours, and secondary routes, my thing is 7 days. Peace River, they didn't have timelines. They just had just accumulation standards. So we sat down. Any questions so far? I'm going along pretty good.
All right, Councilor Sharp.
Yeah.
I was just curious, the other ones have measurements. What is our triggered event measurement of snow?
We don't, our trigger is any snow right now.
So it don't matter if it's a centimeter or 5, so.
Our trigger right now is any snow. Yeah. we start removing any snow at the moment.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No, okay, continue on.
So we sat down with the staff and, oh, you have a question? Councillor?
No, I'm just reading over.
Okay.
Yeah, keep going.
So we sat down with our staff just to get their input and their feedback on how they felt everything was going. One of their concerns was, at one time, we did have 5 operators, but when we created the supervisor position and we moved Rena into the supervisor position, we did not backfill. So we reduced our operators by 1. Completing all the priorities with no policy, so they feel the same thing. Where are we at? Where do we need to go? And one of their biggest concerns was this challenging locations to clear snow. The West Grove dead ends is a big one for them. They really challenged by them. There's some places where we have some really sharp shoulders, like the, for example, when you're going along the airport area there, the first pass, you don't even know where the path is, and you're trying to go along there and you have some sharp shoulders. It's a challenge. Some sidewalks are directly right up against curbs and cars, so we got to be, they got to be very careful and diligent in doing their jobs. So that's a challenge for them. Our rinks are in really, really bad shape, and it's a lot of hard work. One of the things we are doing this summer, is we are going to also put a lot of fill into Griffith and try to do some leveling and see, and hopefully that's going to help us a little bit this winter. Public understanding of the scope. Most of our routes take multiple passes because you just can't just do one pass and leave it that way. You got to keep widening these routes to keep the snow off it, because if you just did one pass and the snow would just keep building and you would never eventually get down them. So we got to widen all those routes all winter long and keep them wide, or they'll just become like the train track you see in the videos, right? So just this, and it would be very difficult. And honestly, the staff have a lot of pride in what they do, and they're awful concerned about changing service levels. And if we take longer to do stuff, they're very worried and concerned that the public will think that they're not doing their job well, and that they take a ton of pride in doing their job really well. So administration's assessment is not really that much different than the staff's. We have a lot of competing priorities when there is continuous snow. So keeping priority 1s clean, keeping the priorities 2 and 3 and 4 routes clear. The rinks are a challenge, and then ice and snow accumulation on sidewalks and trails. If you leave them too long, then it's harder to remove the snow from them, and it takes a ton of more salt that you got to put down on them to keep them maintained, and that's an additional cost. So options to consider for council: snow removal, assess the current snow removal windows. Snow removal, assess the snow removal we do adjacent to private properties. Alter operational priorities. So key questions for council: should the town remove snow adjacent to private property, specifically on 2nd and 4th Avenue? Current practices are inconsistent, with some sidewalks being cleared and not others. What is an acceptable period of time in which to remove snow from the 4 snow route categories? How should park winter operations be prioritized? For example, should snow route priorities could be adjusted? Outdoor rinks could be cleared before certain snow routes, for example. Are there any service areas for which service levels should be increased or decreased? This is where we're seeking some,
All those are easy questions to answer.
yeah,
All right,
some
we,
feedback and direction.
all right, we'll open the floor.
So summary of the presentation. We believe the current level of snow removal for facilities, sidewalks and trails is very high right now. The Parks Department has limited resources and competing priorities. Taxpayer resources are currently being used to remove snow from private properties with little consistency across properties. Questions and discussion.
All right, Councilor Pacich.
Thank you, through the mayor. Personally, I don't want to see any changes because we're doing a good job, and it's the one area in the community where people have said it's amazing how good of a job they do, and the staff are doing an amazing job keeping those trails clear and the sidewalks clear. You know, sometimes the only time you get a compliment, a negative in the community is well, they're driving right by that street, why just keep the plate down. As far as the private businesses and the ones in yellow, it is sometimes unfair because they haven't the highway plow trucks do spray a lot of stuff onto those sidewalks or the side of the road. Those are almost all businesses and they're in our highest tax bracket for what they're paid in taxes in this community. And there's a lot of areas there where the people along those yellow routes are high traffic area where if we have to wait for our departments to hound the people to get their streets cleared, we pose risks to some people in our community. My own personal opinion on the rinks is I think a lot of kids become better skaters if they're skating with shovels in their hands and clearing the rinks themselves. So I think that the days of the pond hockey when people had to skate with the shovels, that's where they became better skaters. But my own personal opinion, I don't skate on hockey rinks, so that's okay. But other than that, I think it's good. I do think using Hinton and Jasper as comparatives is a poor choice of communities considering Hinton nor Jasper. And I assure you Jasper does not get snow with a town site. It's very easy to have their level of service because they get snow on the streets like twice a year. Last year was an exception, but most years there's never anything on Jasper streets or there's things. But other than that, I think the high level is good. I think that your crews have been doing an amazing job. So if we have to set a policy, I will support going to a lesser program because this is the things that people who recreate their community, they can touch and feel. And I think it's important. So I'd probably look at, you know, if you're going from the yellow line on the right to the yellow line on the left, you might as well just keep your blade down and finish that blue section on. Like, really, like, why are you leaving up those two blocks? Like,
so through the chair,
you have to go through the chair, not through me. So
through the chair to Councillor. There's only one section where we do have a challenge right here at 50th, where there's the street lights, which we don't do because of the difficulty of the street lights, just for your aware. So that if we chose to do that, which we don't do, we would need some additional resource to do that if we took that on. Just
into the chair, and that's fair.
Yeah.
It is very congested with different styles of lights and standards and stuff, and I get that. So like for me, I just like those are very high traffic pedestrian routes, and including the one on the far left. The town has a sidewalk because they brokered a deal with the owner to get land, and the deal was they didn't have to shovel the sidewalk. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a sidewalk there. So that may not be in writing, but that was the brokered deal with the previous owners of that property. And that's the only connection to Glenwood, and it's one of those areas that does have a lot of traffic, foot traffic, even in the winter. So that's my opinion.
Councillor Taylor and then Councillor Sharp.
Through the mayor to Secretary, thank you for bringing this to us in August.
Yes.
Not in the middle of January. So like Councillor Position, it was interesting. I went through your report and presentation and I was like, okay, well, I'll answer his questions. And you know, you ask about the acceptable period of time, which moves on. I was like, well, what they have looks good. And then I looked at the question, and like Councilor Position, I'm like, yeah, should government be shoveling private property? But they're at such a disadvantage in that area, so we probably should. We probably should continue that level of service. So for what I saw in your presentation, I have really nothing to change or add. I like the idea of perhaps putting it in writing to solidify for you and your staff what your, you know, priorities should be and that sort of thing. I understand the concern though of putting the timelines, but I also think timelines are important for the public to gauge as well. You said in your presentation tonight that a vast majority of times you're ahead of schedule. You're getting it done. So, you know, if people do have concerns, they'll bring those concerns to me. And we'll, you know, I have no problem saying that a vast majority of the time they're well ahead of schedule. It's only in major events that we see some, like we did last year, we see some abnormalities, right? So I'm satisfied with what, you know, the services that you've done so far. So those are my comments. Thanks.
Councilor Schnurr.
I have to agree with the first two, except for the first one. I'll disagree on his comments. But on the blue, where you have Second Avenue and yours like that, I used to do this years ago, so we need to adapt to clean them. But I agree with you, we need a policy on that. Like Second and Fourth Avenue, especially Fourth Avenue, some of them it's very unfair. But if we put a policy in due to the one ways, because problem is you're going to clean Second and Fourth, and the people in Third are going to say, hey, how about me? So I agree, and I'm glad you brought it to us in August, but we need to put a policy in to clean those sidewalks for that specific reason, because some are farther away, but if you get closer by the Black Gold and stuff, they got a huge disadvantage if you go over to some of the other places far away. But we need a policy on Fourth Avenue. I would explore Second Avenue because I get the same concern. Who's the idiot running the plow? And he cleaned the sidewalk, lifted his blade and drove over the next sidewalk for the next three blocks and then dropped the blade. So if manpower is needed, and a lot of times where your light poles and stuff are in the way, no one expects you to do an excellent job. So I think some of the blades could tip or whatever on an angle, tip more and clean them. So in the areas going around light poles, hey, we can't put the highest standard, but I have to agree. The park staff, I'm totally amazed. Don't change anything because they do a wonderful job. So, but that's my two concerns. Then blues, yes, let's put a policy in place. We look after Second and Fourth. It's easy to explain to the public. You do not have a snow plow clearing the highway, blowing in, covering your sidewalk 5 minutes after you covered it. So don't change anything except the blues. Put a policy and let's explore the option of blue, because I did have the comment many times. And then the person that's stuck doing blue, he goes, well, I did it in the damn, excuse the French, the downtown thing packed it and made it tougher for me. So I would like to see that change. Other than that, keep everything going the same way.
Anybody else? Okay, I haven't spoke yet, so thank you for the presentation. I do think our crews do an amazing job. You can see the pride that they put in. One of the things that I heard loud and clear from the public is they love that they can access our trail systems in the wintertime. People are active in the community. And even last year when we were struggling with the snow removal, people understood that the roads took priority, and they're like, no, we understand. We just want to know kind of what the timeline is. We don't want to get all of our gear on and find out that it's all snow packed and all that sort of thing. So I think a policy looking at those priorities is important. I also think there needs to be flexibility, like we talked about the road clearing policy. Sometimes in extreme events, we're not going to be able to accomplish this no matter how hard we try. And guess what? The trails, I'm sorry, are going to have to be the last on the list. Sometimes our crews, I think our parks folks helped a roads department last year. I agree. Second and Fourth Avenues with the snow plows going through there, that is a constant complaint. They go, they hire somebody, they pay money to go clear it. And then 5 minutes later, there goes the light core truck and it's all filled in again. I think we need to be consistent, that we treat everybody the same. So do that entire section. If you're getting close to Main Street and we have some issues, we just do a path, and we need to have a conversation with those property owners adjacent to them. This is what we're doing. you're gonna have to go and clear out the bulbs or whatever, anything that we can't do. I think they'd be appreciative of us, helping in that regard. I also think that rinks are a big priority, so when the situation is right, that might have to move up on the priority list, since maybe your trails have to go down the list. And I think if we don't have enough resources to continue with this level of service, then we need to have options to bring in contractors to do parking lots and stuff. Your list here is amazing. I never understood that we had that many properties that the Parks Department was looking after. So I think as we have our budget discussion, we need to have a look at that if we want to maintain this level of service, or providing in that policy some flexibility to ensure that community priorities are being met. But I think it's really important that we continue having an active community and trying to have a level of service that encourages people to access those areas. I look at the Glenwood area, for example. There are kids that are walking to school every morning. And we cannot afford to have those all snow covered. And then we have an enforcement problem with bylaw trying to get these places to clear their sidewalks. As Councillor Pasichny says, some of our highest taxpayers are on our highway corridor, and they get the least amount of services from the town. We don't have to clear in front of the roadways in front of the businesses because that's a provincial responsibility. A lot of them are already doing a lot of maintenance. So this is I think those businesses are already paying for services from the town, and this is one of those value adds that we're ready to give them. And everybody in our community accesses those areas on a continual basis. So that's kind of where I'm at. Councillor Taylor, you had another question?
Just a further comment through the mayor. I also like the committee, you're also bringing this at the right time. I know we're redoing the snow and ice policy. We've talked about it at council meeting before. Has there been partnerships within those two policies to create similar visions in terms of what end results of clearing will look like? Is that asking any administration, like in terms of looking at this future policy and then the current snow and ice policy, clearing policy that we're looking at? Has there been communications or similar visions to that?
Through the chair, Councillor Taylor, we modeled the entire process over what the process they did. They had the benefit of starting with a policy that was adopted by previous council, so they had something to work with. We've got nothing to start with, so we're probably going to start with where they used it and kind of model it after that. But we're starting from scratch, and they were adapting what was already out there.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Sharp.
Just one quick comment, you may or may not be able to answer it. On the trails, due to the many dogs walking the trails, salt or sand, has that never been brought to your attention? Because some people complain the salt will hurt the dogs.
Through the chair to Councillor Chenard, I did an extensive review last winter, not this winter, the previous winter. The challenge is sand doesn't melt the snow or the ice, right? And dog friendly or pet friendly ice melt typically don't have the same level of ingredients and mostly will not work at the lower temperatures. So they're not useful, quite frankly, in our lower temperatures up here. So if we use sand or the pet friendly, they're not going to work. They're not going to get rid of the ice. We're just going to have build up of ice, sand, ice, sand, ice, sand. And if we use a pet friendly version, it won't melt at the lower temperatures. So we don't have a lot of options if we actually want to melt the ice down to the pavement. So.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Anybody else? Councillor Moore?
Through the chair, I just had one question. I thought we had well, it wasn't a policy, but I think it was a recommendation that we wouldn't start clearing the snow until it got to a certain level before. Through the chair, Councillor Moore, not for pedestrian routes, for trails and sidewalks and that, like I said before, especially for facilities, we remove the snow immediately, always.
Right, I probably thought it was, got it confused with the roads.
Yeah.
It looks like, okay,
You can
thank you.
probably ride your bike on the road. That's-
I don't ride my bike.
On the sidewalk, that's
to-
the road.
Mr. Latour, I don't know if you got what you need from the group here today. I think what we're hearing is we'd like to maintain the current level of service, maybe some clarity around what we're doing along the highway. Are you feeling that there's just not enough resources to continue with this level of service? Is that the biggest concern? Or could that be addressed through maybe instituting some thresholds on some of these priorities?
Through the chair to council, I think we can maintain the level of service. I think our biggest challenge is with the conditions like we had last year with the rinks was very challenging. But I think we have a couple options we've talked about with some maybe casual help to help with flooding that we can address in the budget, that we'd be able to maintain all the levels of service. And the reality is when we have a perfect storm like last year with warm pre-season and then snow, we could not have done really anything more last year with the rinks. But it's still always going to be a challenge, but there's still ways we can address that without any major changes.
Yeah, I just point out too, like if the issue is the boards and stuff, then we need to start talking about doing some replacement and maintenance, like you said, backfilling. Excuse me. I think it's something that was certainly missed out, not just last year, but because we struggled the year before too with COVID and everything else that we were dealing with. You certainly noticed different level of service there. And I agree with Councillor Positioning. Clearing the rinks should be like the lowest priority after they're set up. People can look after that, and if they want to utilize the service and we're buried with other things, I think that is reasonable. And I think it's also very reasonable, and I don't think anybody on council would disagree, for us to, when we get those calls, when we're dealing with those extreme events, to say, sorry, trails are just not happening right now. People are pretty understanding of that, because I think they understand they're getting a pretty high level of service during those times. So Councillor Sharp, if you have anything new.
Yeah, getting back to the rinks, at one time, they used to have like neighborhood people that would look after rinks. Is that still out there?
Yeah, for the neighborhood rinks.
Yeah, for the neighborhood rinks, like even in Glenwood and all that. So what we're just talking about, the snow, some of the people would just say, hey, they take it on their own. We got a big snow event. The group of parents, whatever, will go out and they just shovel the snow. Is that still happening, or is that a possibility? Maybe educate the public saying, okay, we're gonna go and flood it. And if you have volunteers that are saying, hey, the kids can't go out and use them, well, how about if you go out with your shovel and the kids, like on and practice skating and, clean them themselves? Because I mean, I have no problem. The guys going up, hey, I can't skate. Do you want me to clean the roads or the side? So trails and stuff is an extra thing, and if people cannot understand during a major snow that we're looking at the priorities, like I agree, put them on the low end. I do understand your standards, but if you're doing your best to clean the sidewalks, if a person has nerve to call me and say, hey, the rink's not clean, well, I think you got something better to do, go help to clean it. So, that's my view on those. And same with the trail, maybe you can just walk through the snow and we'll clean it later.
So through the chair to Councillor Chenard, the two community rinks that we have in Tiffin and West Haven, they are taken care of by community groups.
Right.
Our service level right now is we maintain the two larger rinks.
Right.
So we would have to change the service level and ask the community to do that. We currently take care of them.
Okay.
But right now they're at a lower service level, and but we're looking at other options to, like I said, potentially some casual help, just that we don't have to take two operators out of the four
to do a rink, you just one, and then 3 guys could be doing snow, and if we just have a casual person helping move a hose around, we can manage it a little bit better, and it's, you know, negligible budget wise, right?
Good, thanks, it was just a thought.
And I think too, what we've seen with the weather, it was crazy, like it was like -40 and then it was +7, and it's like, nothing you can do to make those rinks go right. All right, Mr. Latour, hopefully you got some clarity there, and I imagine you're gonna be bringing forward a policy at a future meeting.
Through the chair to council, yes, I have clarity, and I appreciate your time, and we'll endeavor to put together a policy and get it back to you in a timely manner.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
We do have a motion on the floor. Do we vote on that already?
Yeah.
All right, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Motion carried. And I will call a 5-minute recess. Just a quick break.
Oh, we need Daniel?
All right, we're gonna resume the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Next on the agenda, can I get a motion, please? A council approve proceeding with a grant application for the Alberta Community Partnership Municipal Internship Program administered through Municipal Affairs to assist in funding the employment of a finance intern for an 18-month term. Councilor Sherrard will make that motion, and this is being presented by Ms. Sarah Bittner, General Manager of Corporate Services.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Council. So administration is once again recommending participation in the Municipal Affairs Internship Program. The objective of the program is to encourage recent post-secondary graduates to consider a career in our municipal world. They have 3 streams, which is administration, finance, or land use planning. This time administration recommends seeking an intern for the finance stream. A finance stream intern could conduct financial analysis, provide recommendations to augment our core financial services, as well as engage in project-based work. In the past, the internship program has been for a 1-year program with the ability to apply for an extension for 2 years. In 2023, they are changing this to an 18-month program for all the streams. So you get an intern for 18 months as a one-shot with no extension request required. The province provides $60,000 in funding towards the salary benefits and other expenses. So over the 18 months, the town will be responsible for approximately $46,000 over that period. So it would be split between the 23 and 24 budgets. The application deadline for this grant is October 3rd, which is why this is being brought to council tonight.
All right, thank you, Ms. Bittner, for your presentation. Council, any questions, comments, or concerns? All right, I've always been supportive of the municipal internship program, but we did elect not to apply for this year, and question through to CEO Beveridge, since she hasn't had the opportunity to speak at this meeting. Why the change in direction here? Is it just because we're in a better position capacity wise as an organization?
Mr. Mayor, to be fair, at the time that we decided to pause with the program, we weren't in a place where we really were in a stable position. And so just looking at all of the areas that we were requiring some with assistance with just getting our regular routine work done at that time, we determined that it was in our best interest just to pause at that time and just focus on the routine items. And the whole purpose as well is to continue with training and education. It's hard to do that when we don't have people in the roles to be able to train and educate.
Thank you. Councillor Positioning.
Yeah, to the chair, to everybody, it's if you don't train people to do the jobs, you're not going to be able to fill those jobs. It's like
The cycle.
So you volunteering to train?
You should write that down.
Well, I think that we see here with Mr. Lucas with our organization and Mr. Passy that the internship program has been very beneficial to our organization, and I'd be happy to continue on with that. And I know that Edson has been highlighted by the provincial government as well for having a very successful program. Go ahead.
And it's nice for the government pays for part of their wage.
Yes, absolutely. Is there a municipal internship CAO program?
Are you?
No.
Okay, never mind.
Counselor Schnurr.
Through the mayor, to answer that question, that is a very good question, because we could train them and send them off to other towns and use these bargaining tools where we need to trade a CEO for 3 other, like playing chess.
So
So
Mr. Mayor,
let's see
there
if we
is
can train
definitely
them.
the administration stream, which is strictly for that purpose.
Perfect. Okay. We're very happy with our CEO though, so there's no need.
Should be a great trainer.
All right, with that, we've got to have some fun here, right? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carried.
What happens in an August meeting?
1 or 2 of them are holidays.
It is after 9 o'clock after all. Can I get a motion, please? The council accept the 2023 citizen budget engagement results for information. Council positioning will move that, and Ms. Bittner will be joining us once again.
Thank you for your presentation. Next. Oh, it's 9 o'clock.
We haven't got to the.
So, yes, so we did the our citizen budget engagement again this year. I'll run through this fairly quickly because I know in your package you did have a lot of those results. So we ran the tool from July 4th to July 28th. This year we had 392 visitors and 208 responses compared to last year of 259 visitors and 114 responses. So each year we are actually going up with the visitors and the responses. This year we asked, would you like to see a higher, lower or same level of service in the areas that we put into the engagement? They're also able to add comments on each of those areas. And to get this out to the public engagement, we advertised in the paper, we did Facebook posts, we did sponsored Facebook ads and on the radio, and also an insert was included with all the July utility bills. So starting with protective services, with fire, you see on the right is the graph that you have within your agenda. And on the left, we've just summarized and highlighted made bold the sort of majority rules for each one. So as you see, fire here have about 70% as a keep the same result. Community enforcement was 47.5, so it wasn't quite 50%, but it was the majority was to keep the same result. RCMP, as you see, there's over half, 58.2, for an increase in RCMP service, a level of service was the result for that question. Also, there were, as I said, the opportunity for comments. So I've gone through each section and sort of pulled a couple out that maybe have recurred a few times throughout the comment section. So on the fire, there are too many calls that they're not needed for. And also they do a great job. So that was for the fire department. For community enforcement, some comments about not seeing them enough and wanting more visibility from bylaw, and also wishing to see more enforcement for unsightly premises, vehicle towing for snow, etc., things like that. RCMP, obviously good work, and a few people appreciated that public engagement like the town halls that they've been doing. Again, too much petty crime, but really the judicial system being lax on that kind of linked to that comment. Moving into community services, FCSS, we have around 50% saying to keep the same level of service that we have at the moment. Parks, again, 58.2, that's creeping up there. And community development, just like our programming, etc. It's not quite 50%, but it's still the majority for keeping the same level of service. For our leisure centre, again, basically 50% to keep the same level of service that we are providing at the moment at the leisure centre. A couple of comments from these areas, FCSS, that families do rely on the FCSS program, and they feel that we've done well with the available funding that we have for that program. Parks, a great job on keeping the grass mowed, understanding that we have a lot of green spaces to maintain. And a few comments on beautifying the downtown core. For community development, some felt that we had sufficient programming for our size. Some mentioned that maybe if we have more facilities or activities for the under 18. Our leisure centre, this is basically the same comment I think we had as last year. Move forward.
And
with
the year
facility.
before, and the year before.
Move forward, don't do it.
Brand new facility not needed. That was basically, I think, if you look through those comments, all those comments
Same people
were
comment.
basically on the new facility. Moving on to infrastructure, roads, sidewalks, snow removal. This is another area where we have a 60% result of an increase in the current level of service. Waste collection, 74% to keep the same. So this is our contracted pickup of garbage. So we have quite a majority of people very happy with that service. Again, with the landfill, we have 67% saying to keep the same.
I'm running a school.
And some comments from the infrastructure side for the snow, better management of road clearing in the winter. But staff do a great job with available resources and we need more money for infrastructure. Waste management, some have said the garbage, they would like the garbage collected every week. That would of course increase the cost for that service. And in addition of curbside recycling pickup, I think we see that every year as well. The landfill, even though people were saying for this, that to keep it quite resounding, to keep it the same, opening Sunday and close another day during the week was some suggestion in the comments. And the people in the trailer courts wanting to be included in this our spring cleanup. At the time they're not.
Go ahead.
If I may, Mr. Romero, through the administration, why don't we include the trailer courts in the spring cleanup? Is there a reason? Well, the rest of the town gets to put all their junk in the corner.
Through your Mayor, I do not have an answer for that. I didn't realize they weren't included at this point in time, so I'll have to ask and find out what the reason is.
Go ahead, Mr. Bethgy.
Just historically, the trailer parks are considered a business property, not a residential property. So that's why it was not included in the past.
Thank you.
So I did that.
I do think that's something we need to consider. I've had that request, and that helps keep the rest of the community clean as well. And I would say that some of those individuals are probably the most needing of that service, and if we're providing it to everybody else. Go ahead, Councilor.
The trailer courts are not included in the town pickup if they're separate, so therefore their cleanup should be separate. Trailer courts are responsible for their own waste removal.
Yeah, I understand the waste removal side of it from that side of it, but each one of those mobile homes pays their own personal property tax on their property to the community. So it's one of those things I think that maybe the annual cleanup should be looked at.
All right.
So that's the end of the presentation. Just as information tonight to maybe keep in mind when we start our budget deliberations.
I'll just mention, Ms. Bittner, we did this through the advice of yourself and CO Beverage to do this earlier, so we could include some of this feedback as we are doing our budget deliberations. Too often in the past, we were doing this process a little bit later on in the year. So I know there were some comments that we never listened to this, well, this will give us a better opportunity to consider that as we are building our next budget. So thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carried. No information items, no sundry items. Council committee reports going back to July the 20th.
I have nothing to report.
Councilor Taylor.
On July 30th, I was at the town section of the Amazing Race, which was done by the Gallery Museum. It was great because I sat there and John did all the work and I just took photos. And also on August 9th, I joined the mayor and members of council presenting a huge check to the Seniors Transportation Society, which was for the mayor's golf tournament, which I could not attend, but that's my report.
All right, Councilor Moore.
Yes, I'll be brief. I have a couple items. July 20th, I virtually attended a census and population meeting. And on August 9th, I was also in the check presentation photo. I was delighted, of course, to help out at the tournament, and it was very, very successful. I raised lots of money for ESTS.
Well, that's it.
Thank you.
Perfect. Councilor.
Oh, I got a long report. I was in the photo walk on August 9th.
All right, thank you. July 26th, I attended a virtual meeting with our general manager or manager of community services with Counseling Alberta, which is an offshoot from Counseling Calgary, which is providing mental health supports throughout the province now. They have a contract with the Alberta government. So every rural community now has access to the service, which ties into our strategic plan. The service is done virtually, which will provide easier access for people. They don't have to arrange transportation and those sorts of things. So we just got briefed on the service, and I did some public posting on that. So hopefully we'll see people accessing this service. It is affordable. There is a little bit of a fee that has to be paid, but it's no more than $20 an hour, and hopefully it'll enhance the supports available to people in our community as it relates to our strategic plan as well. And then, of course, the ESTS presentation. So I'm looking forward to next year's golf tournament. We have no financial items. Questions from media and public regarding items from this council meeting?
Your worship, both members of the media have left the meeting, so you're on the hot seat.
Really? So something I said? Okay. I'll take a motion to go into a closed session. Councillor Chenard, all those in favor? Carried. All right, can I get a motion, please, that council approve a refund of $166,775.82, representing a portion of the 2022 municipal property taxes applied to roll number 8005. Councillor Taylor will make that motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion defeated. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Go ahead, Councillor Chenard. All those in favor? Motion carried.